to the Infrastructure Network. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I am your host. Today's guest is Larry Oliver, who is the Director of Utility Management at Groundbreakers. Thanks for joining me, Larry.
Thank you. It's great to be on here.
It's great to have you, man. We met previously and we're talking about utilities in the underground world. But before we jump into all the utility issues and the underground space and Sue and all that stuff, why don't we talk a little bit about you and how you've gotten to the industry?
I actually started in the utility industry back in the mid to later 90s, 97, somewhere around there. Got into the public locating world. So I actually started off in the field as a utility locator. Spent several years there. Then kind of moved over into the private utility locating world for a few years before I went and spent 7 or 8 years working for uh, an engineering firm. That's where I really got into some of the how that those type of work deals with, utilities on a state project, highways, bridges, things of that nature. And then I turned around and about 10 years ago went back into private utility locating. And then recently I came over here to Groundbreakers, where we opened up a complete utility management division to help compensate or to help complement, I should say, their hydrovac company.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. When you
Oh, yeah.
started in the industry, what was it like for you as like a rookie coming in?
It was a lot different back then. You didn't have as many locate companies as you have now. Um, we started off, you would have paper prints. You didn't have compute. Obviously, we didn't have computers. I remember when we used to get our tickets and they would come to us. You would either get them at the office or they would send them to you on a rolled fax machine. So you'd had to tear off those papers that would change colors throughout the day, depending upon the sun. I can remember when the gas company first took all their prints and decided to take them from paper to microfiche. A lot of people nowadays, they don't even know what microfiche
What is
are,
it?
but
What is it?
microfiche, we had this great big tote, and you would keep it in your truck, and then you'd have to look at the index card, find the address for wherever you were going, and then that would give you a code, and then you'd have to go find that card. And then you would look in and try to find the most recent date. And you had to look at it with a little magnifying glass type I don't even know what you call the thing, eye viewer. And you would actually look through that, and then you would turn around and you'd be able to see the print of that address and then be able to verify your locate to make sure it was accurate.
It's
The
wild.
problem a lot of guys had, they would lay it up on their dash when they were done looking at it to go out and check it in the field. The sun would come through the windshield right through the eyeglass and they'd burn a hole through the microfiche and they would melt the print so they would never have that print again.
Wow. So that's how they used to like track utilities.
Correct.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Wild. And this is like what? When did you start? Is that 80s, 90s? When was that?
Uh, I would say 98 was when I started using the microfiche.
98.
So it
I
was
feel like we were so
a
further ahead than that in
yeah,
technology.
you would think, yes. Well, what's bad is it wouldn't surprise me if you probably still don't have companies out there either using microfiche or paper. And that's what's
No.
kind of bad is with the technology today, you would think everybody would be out there creating maps. But I know there's been projects where we've been called out to actually go out and do locates, help find lines. They're not sure where they're at, but they still do not actually GPS map in these utilities. It's like you find them for one project and then they're gone. It's not
Wow.
find them and keep them.
Wow. Well, we're definitely going to get into more of that stuff down the road here. So let's go back to that as a rookie, in the utility space using micro fishing. And then, what was it like what was the culture like back then? I'm curious.
Honestly, I think the culture was, when it comes to public locating, a lot of it was probably similar to what it is today. A lot of these guys, you call 811, those guys are probably getting 40, 50, 60 tickets a day, and there's no way they can get to all those tickets. And that's the same way as it was back then. And it just keeps going, and it just seems to be a repetitive cycle. And that's the part that really needs to improve. Um, we have a project going on, or we did a few weeks ago, where we had called in. You have to call 811. After we're already on the job site working, I get an email from a guy telling me that, hey, I haven't been able to get a chance to get out there to mark our utilities. It's going to be another week. When that week rolls around, he sends me another email telling me it's going to be another week. The 811 law, depending upon the state, 48 to 72 hours. It's not supposed to be 2.5, 3 weeks. by the time he was going to get out there to actually do the locate, my ticket was going to be expired. So those are things I think we really need to look at addressing, and those things should be corrected in the 811
Are
industry.
you saying that some of the problems back in '98 are still current today?
Most of the problems from 98 are still current today.
That is wild. Oh my goodness. Why do you think some of that is?
Um, Budgetary reasons. I think everybody wants to get as much as they can for as little money as they can.
Yeah.
And it's, I always try to tell people it's really hard to put a dollar value on quality. I mean, do you want cheap or do you want quality?
Yeah.
You wouldn't go out and buy the cheapest car you can find if you're wanting a nicer, reliable car. But it seems to be when it comes to utility locates, it's just a little different than that. People are trying to get off as cheap as they can, and you just kind of have to work around that.
Wow. So we're still stuck in the old days of doing things as the whole industry is kind of doing the same thing. I'm with you. I get it. How was it like as you were young in the younger into the industry, like learning these processes? What did it take for you to become a director of utility management?
Well, I started off in the field, learning how to do the locates, was out there in the field for a few years, ended up becoming a locate trainer.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of worked my way up that way. And then due to some company mergers and acquisitions and things like that, you kind of grow through the process. A lot of the knowledge and experience I gained along the way actually came when I went to work for the engineering firm. So that's, you start to receive some NDOT certifications. You start to receive the additional training. You see how it's done in the field. You're testing materials and things like that. So then when I got back into private locating, a lot of that helped me along the way.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I mean, that's a great way to learn from the bottom up. I mean, then you know all the processes and everything else. What?
Yep. And then it gives me an advantage, I think, because, I see a lot of people complaining, they're like, well, my boss wants me to do this, but he doesn't understand because he's never been there. He's never done this. And I'm in the situation to where, no, I've been there, done that, and then I can understand what we're doing and how we need to do it in order to be successful.
I've heard that before. Yeah. Well, they don't know what they're doing because they've never done it, and then they don't know the history, and the generation gap is pretty substantial there. So they don't even understand what you've gone through. And what do you love about the industry?
What I'm really enjoying right now is trying to bring the industry up to date. Like you were mentioning earlier, trying to bring it up to speed. When I came over here to Groundbreakers and we opened up this utility management division, the big thing that we keyed on early on are what are the differences out there, what changes need to be made, and what can we do differently that will set us apart from many of the other companies out there. And the one thing that we came up with is that we were going to use the newest technology available. We were going to then any additional software we needed to make it better, and that we were going to actually GPS map every job we do and then provide that data to our clients. So at least they're not using paper or microfiche. Anything that we've done, they're actually going to have that information and we're going to provide it to them at no additional cost. And we're hoping that that helps change the industry a little bit.
Yeah, value, customer service. It's a big thing. You can do a lot with
Mm-hmm.
that. A lot of referrals come out of that from my experience when I've done it. Just provide more value.
Well, that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, for sure. You were saying about we were talking previously about well, I'll go back. One thing I've always been fascinated by is this whole spray paint marketing by 811, marketing the utilities and stuff like that, and the gap, the distance between how far these utilities are potentially off. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
In Indiana, they get, for an example, 2 feet either side of their mark.
Right.
So that's a 4 foot window for their accuracy. And then the law says you have to hand dig within 2 feet to either side of the mark. Well, if you got a utility that's 4 or 5 feet deep, and then you got to give them 2 foot to either side of the mark, that's a lot of hand digging.
Hmm.
Um, the equipment can be a lot more accurate than that, but it's got to go down to the experience, the knowledge, the training that these guys receive in the field. Um, I know I've seen some companies, you bring a guy on, you give him 2 or 3 days worth of training, and then they cut him loose and send him out into the field. There's other companies out there where, 12 to 16-week training program, and that's even if you came in with previous experience,
Mm,
just because they're trying to make sure that the quality is a lot more accurate.
yeah. Wow. That's probably a reason why everyone's, well, not everyone, but a lot of people strike utilities, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And a lot of times it's people getting into a hurry. Prime example, we had a project site that I'm aware of that I was actually on site when the utility locator showed up to actually mark the sewer main. Now, keep in mind, we had already drove a camera down the sewer main and marked it with the beacon. So we've already marked this sewer main. But when the locator went to market, he literally looked at his print and it showed him it went from manhole A to manhole B. So he just walked it from the two manholes painting the line. But the problem was he noticed some landscaping and stuff in his way. So he just kept painting as he walked out and around the landscaping. So at one point in there, his marks were off 8 to 10 feet, which is sad because we had already marked it for him.
That's wild. So there would be a lot of issues with accountability in this line, marking of utilities, it seems like.
If the line was to get hit and you were to go by those markings, he was not even close to being within a 2 foot tolerance zone.
That's wild. Yeah. I remember going out and GPSing utilities, our company, before we sold it. And man, they would be off. The maps we got and everything we got from the utility was like, where are these things? Our guys would spend hours trying to find these utilities and stuff, and especially in their easements or in the wooded areas and things like that. Because there's no mapping that was accurate at all. That was wild too. The amount of time that it took us was the issue. It cost us a lot of money to do that. I mean, these guys are spending hours trying to
Yeah.
find them. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of times I try to tell people a prime example. You're talking about trying to find these utilities. If you have sewers, for an example, we can talk about storm or you can talk about sanitary. Most of the time, unless they run a tracer wire with them, it's a new sewer here in the last year or two. They can't be located by normal electromagnetic means. So what the guys will do, especially on the mains, is they just line them up manhole to manhole. Okay, I think it runs there. They'll paint a line, and a lot of times they just straight line it, walk it. They don't even put a string down and try to make the line straight. So you get this zigzag line that goes back and forth. The problem I've seen on a lot of that is those are not always accurate. Just because it looks like it goes that way, it could turn a little bit and actually run to another manhole. It could run to another location. So I try to tell everybody the best way to get an accurate locate of a sewer line is to use a robotic camera. CCTV, they have a beacon on them, they produce a signal. Then you can actually see the condition of the line. And then you can also locate the beacon, locate it as you go down through there, and you actually know exactly where it is. I know of a hospital, for an example, where when you look in two different manholes, you think that those two manholes connect. And for years, that is how people always marked them, a straight line from manhole A to manhole B. And that's how it was actually on their prints. The problem with this hospital is when they called us in to inspect all of the sewer lines, it was actually manhole A to manhole B is actually now underneath one of the radiology type rooms or whatever. The hospital building is actually built on top of it. And then it comes back out to the other manhole. So that's technically not manhole B, that's C. So the line that they thought ran through there, that line doesn't even exist. And it actually goes at an angle out under the building and then comes back out.
Oh man,
And until they ran a camera to find it, nobody knew this.
I'm laughing because I've experienced that in a city where we were looking for the utility. It was underneath the building. They ran it right. They built the building right over top of the utility, and nobody was. They actually, yeah, we were like, man, did they put a manhole in the building? Like, could get access to this thing? That's wild.
We just did a project a couple weeks ago where they were working out in the easement, I think the sidewalk area to put in like a new light, new crosswalk, something of that nature. And they ended up jackhammering down into what is the basement.
You've experienced a lot of stuff, Larry. You got stories
Yeah.
to. You got a lot of stories. I feel.
Well, they wanted us to come out and use GPR, and we used a couple other, and we used some beacons and everything. So we ended up going down into the basement of this. It was an old bank, and then we went out and marked all of the the limits around where they ended up having to fill in the entire corner of this basement with concrete.
Wow.
So as long as nobody goes digging up that sidewalk out in that area for a while, they should be okay. Because otherwise, you're going to be digging for a while.
That's wild. What is one of the craziest things you've ever seen? Is that one of them, or is there many?
Oh, there's quite a few. Years ago, especially with cameras, you never know what you're going to find in a sewer. Guys running a CCTV down the sewer line, and he gets to the other end, and he finds I think it was a bobcat or a mountain lion or something looking at him from the other end. Better hope it doesn't chase it back to where you're at. So you get some of that, but
That's pretty wild.
yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I remember being in Baltimore and a storm sewer where they were inspection. They were finding motorcycles under this thing. I mean, it was a 96 inch. It was a massive pipe, but they found like motorcycle, like a old dirt bike, kind of under. How did they get in there? Nobody knew, right? It was wild. It's just things you can find in the sewer systems.
Hmm.
Yeah,
A lot of times we've used GPR for an example to help go out and try to determine the edges or the limits around, for an example, a graveyard. And then you realize they brought a road in or some sidewalks in and things like that, and they've turned the corners only to realize that there were graves that were unmarked that are actually now under the corner of your partially under your sidewalks or walkways, things like that.
that's wild. That's this industry is never not surprising. It's very surprising, actually. All the stuff you find and experience out there. I kind of miss it. I haven't been out in the field for a while doing this stuff, and it's different. I love hearing the stories, though. What has been the biggest challenges now in 2024 since we're at the end of the year? What was one of the bigger challenges for you?
One of the biggest challenges still is getting municipalities or utilities, people like that, to understand the importance of actually collecting the GPS data and mapping their utilities. And I know I'm not the only one working on this. I know of there's some engineering firms that we partner with on projects that I know that's their thing that they're really trying to work with these municipalities on. If you go through and you actually map in your utilities now, you're going to know where they are. Um, we've worked with a few industrial complexes, for an example, and they're getting better at that. Like what a lot of them will do now is they'll call us out, have us come out and do the locate. We will collect the GPS data and map in that area. So now at least they have a partial map. And then the next time they have a project, they can call us and we will just add to that map and help them grow it. So eventually they should end up with a nice, accurate map.
Yeah, that makes a lot
But
of sense.
yeah, that's still the challenge. I mean, years ago, nobody wanted to collect the GPS data and map it in, even though it was available to them. Now, I think back then you probably needed to have a survey firm do it, but that's still the same challenge we have today. So that's kind of what I preach is why are we letting the challenges of the past still affect our decisions of today?
Yeah.
Now you can actually GPS map this and you can do it fairly cheap, especially, if you're using a company like us, for an example, we don't even charge you extra for this, but yet then they turn around and they still choose not to use that data or what they do with it after the fact. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, we have a project coming up next week. They want us to go find a water main. They're not exactly sure where it is. They think they have some GIS coordinates. They're going to go out and give us an idea, but then they want us to find it in 4 or 5 spots with one of our hydro excavation trucks. That's great. I'm trying to get them to go ahead and place locatable marker balls on it
Yeah.
so that at least in the future you can go out and find your water main. But as of right now, I'm not sure that's going to happen. But I mean, that would be, to me, that's the best case scenario is to actually place locatable marker balls on it. But we'll see how it works out. At least, regardless, we're going to have the GPS coordinates of it once we find it.
That's most important. And the future person coming behind you, or is going to have a place to find the utility without striking it. That's the goal.
Correct.
That is the plan. And they can service it, maintain it, that kind of stuff. That's where everyone should be trying to strive for these days. And it's all data. A lot of people don't realize everything is data. Every part of that asset is a data point, no matter what. So the more we capture, the better off the utilities can make better decisions in the future, for sure.
Yeah.
What
A
is,
friend of mine, a
yeah,
friend of mine, Jimmy Wang, I know he was actually talking about that the other day in a presentation he was giving. People need to start using the data and the technology available to track the data. But it's gotten to the point nowadays, there's so many 811 tickets that get called in
Hmm.
that they don't always send them out to the locators. So, like, let's say somebody they hit a phone line, they're like, well, the phone line wasn't marked. There's a good possibility that that 811 ticket never even got sent to a locator in the field because now they're picking and choosing which jobs get sent out.
Mm.
And I mean, it's just somehow we've got to come up with something that works for everyone.
The broken 811 system sounds as bad as the procurement process. That's for sure. It's pretty wild.
It's very, very similar. Yes.
I keep saying the word wild. That's what it feels like sometimes when I'm, just in this civil infrastructure space. It's always something. How
Hmm.
can you elaborate a little bit more on like what some of the your processes of how you locate and then what tools you're using to help the audience?
Sure. What we do is the equipment that we're using right now. We have several pieces of equipment, but the main pieces of equipment are we use the radio detection. It's the RD 8200 SG. The SG standing for survey grade. It's got the GPS data collection antenna built into it. Um, Other equipment we're using, obviously TW6 split box. It's got the pole and everything that separates them. We use that for an induction sweep. So that way we can do our electromagnetic locates, we can do our inductions, we can do our passive sweeps, and then we also use ground penetrating radar provided from radio detection or RD. Um, and then we'll also turn around. We use Schonstedt. We use EnviroSight robotic cameras,
Hmm.
CCTV. We've got multiple trucks of that, and then obviously we have our vacuum excavation trucks and units. As far as software goes, additional software, we use Point One Nav for the correction software for the data. And what that does is allows us to collect data in the field using the RD receiver, and it gives us up to centimeter accuracy. And then we actually track everything through PointMan, which provides us our deliverables and everything that we then give to the client as far as the GPS map. So, for an example, if I did a job for you, you'd receive the KMZ and KML files, you receive all the DWG files. We'll go ahead and do screenshots of that, put it into a PDF. That way, in case you need that type of a report, but we try to provide you with all the data. So you could actually take the data and upload it into your CAD file or what have you so that you could keep your own prints up to date.
Yeah. You have a tool belt, like a massive tool belt to find utilities. There's a lot of equipment
Yes,
involved.
correct.
Processes and equipment, that's for sure. Holy smokes.
Mm-hmm.
What process did you like the most? Like what is most like what's the most like dependable tool in your tool belt, so to speak?
The most accurate way to locate any utility, and I keep telling people this, is electromagnetic locating. So in
Okay.
our case right now, it would be the RD that we use for most of that. There's several different pieces of equipment out there. I know when I was first getting into the industry, Subsite was the equipment that we were using, and I'm still familiar with. And I actually just had a friend of mine told me that he's got one for me to pick up that uh, the old set. It's a Subsite 75 RT. I thought it was a great piece of equipment back in the 90s. So it's going to be nice to have one again that I can just kind of have sitting here.
Yeah.
Had some design flaws to it, like the fact that it was built like a suitcase. And then if you open it up and you're doing locates and it starts raining on you, it collected water like a suitcase, which caused it not to work for very long. So, I mean, there's a lot of differences in the equipment and everything, but
Yeah.
I would say electromagnetic, that's the best way to do any locate. It's going to give you the most accurate locate available. A lot of times, what we run into nowadays, because of GPR and what people see on TV, they think GPR is the be all catch all. If I have you just come out in GPR, you're going to see everything. That is not the case. And I try to explain that to people. For an example, in Indiana, we have a lot of clay. Once you get down past about 4 feet or so, GPR is probably not going to see very much.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to see a clay tile buried in clay soil. I mean, let's be real. That's
That's
you're
so
not
true.
looking for a realistic. Yeah. But I tell them, they're like, well, yeah, but won't GPR see everything else? Not necessarily. So, what I tell them what we need to do is we need to use our electromagnetic locating equipment. We need to hook up. We need to locate all the known utilities. Now I know where that electric line is, where that water line is that I was able to put a signal on, where that sewer line is. Then we'll turn around and push ground penetrating radar or GPR. And then if we pick up on a signal that identifies another utility going through there, we then can try to follow that out with ground penetrating radar to determine where it's at and things like that.
Yeah.
So we'll either maybe we find an abandoned utility, maybe we find an exact utility, but at least now we know. But if I cross that electric line, okay, we've already identified this line and then I can go on.
Yeah.
And then same thing kind of assumes when you come to concrete scanning, we use what's called a prosec unit.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a very nice unit, but the higher frequency, and I'm sure you're aware, the higher the frequency, the shallower the depths. So the ProSec unit, so handheld concrete scanning typically only goes to a depth of about 18 inches, sometimes 24 inches, but it does allow you to see in the concrete where ground penetrating radar really doesn't let you see anything shallow like that first foot or so, but then it starts showing you, but it's just like a reflection. You'll see the little arc in your image. People see ground penetrating radar. I actually had somebody explain it to me the other day. They watched an episode of Bones on TV,
Yeah.
and they were seeing, well, they were pushing ground penetrating radar and they saw bodies in the ground.
Oh my goodness.
Well, no,
That's
you don't
wild.
see bodies in the ground. All you see is this little arc. So that's where Made for TV has made these changes where I think it's people's perceptions are not always accurate.
Right. Right. Wow. So you have a very in-depth process for sure. That's awesome. Well, we're out of our time, Larry. So what I was thinking is give us like a closeout. Like what do you think the future is of utilities and where are we going?
Hopefully the future of utilities will get to the point to where all of the utilities will start collecting the GPS data, and then they will take that data, they'll have an accurate map of their utilities. So when design companies, these different engineering firms then get out there, instead of just providing them a paper image that says, look, I've got a gas main on that side of the road, they can actually give them the GPS data. They can plug that into their CAD files, like you were mentioning earlier, and
Hmm.
then we can begin to do design work based on known information that has a much higher quality than what they have to work with now.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Especially in the future as design work's going to be more digital, that data is going to be super important to be accurate for the design process, especially with AI and stuff in the future. It's coming, but the data is so bad that you really can't do it without, people going out, surveying, laser scanning, whatever, to get all that information to really be able to do what they got to do. So, well, thank you.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you
Well,
so
thank
much
you. I appreciate it.
for jumping on here and
Hopefully, I
appreciate it,
didn't
Larry.
ramble too much.
Ah, you did
Hopefully, I didn't
amazing.
ramble too much.
You did
I
amazing.
appreciate you letting me come on. Let me talk to you.
Great stories, man. Great stories. I'm gonna. Is there a contact information people need to get a hold of you?
Yeah. Anybody wants to get a hold of me, my email address is larry.oliver@groundbreakersllc.com. My cell phone number is 317 four
You
four
sure you want that
seven
out there, Larry?
0177. I'll put it out there. 317 447 0177. And like I said, we're GPS mapping every job we do, and that's at no additional cost. And we will give them all the data because I want them to have it.
Love it, Larry. Thank you for joining me, man.
All right. Thank you. You have a great day.